Hi, hello, it's Jada here, and welcome to my crazy world. I know, I have a lot of explaining to do. There's no excuse for my very abrupt absence, and I know I've been posting here and there, and I have reasons, and I'm gonna explain to you. But as you all may know, 2025 has been very chaotic, and for personal reasons, and with one of them being the state of the world that we are living in right now. When I tell you everything has gone and turned upside down, I really don't understand, but here I am, and I'm happy that I'm here, and I'm happy that I get to really be in this space and be able to have a platform like this, because it shows that I'm not alone and everyone is going through the same thing, and life really be life. And thank you all so much for sticking with me, and thank you for the new subscribers that come along. I will share a little bit of my story in a little bit, but from the title of this video, you probably see the title of the video and you're probably wondering, quirky faith, what does that mean, and why are you talking about it? Here it is. And before I get started, make sure you subscribe and like and follow just for more content. But I also want to start off with a little breather, because I'm going to be talking about some heavy context. I'm going to be talking about a lot of things that can be very triggering, a lot of religious trauma, ableism. If you feel like you need to walk away and take a step back and pause this video, go right on ahead. You are definitely allowed to, but I'm going to do a little breathing exercise. If you're sitting in a seat or if you're sitting on your bed, just make sure you don't fall asleep. I want you guys to close your eyes, put your hand over your heart, and take a deep breath in. Breathe in all the loving and compassion, and then release. Breathe out all of the pain, all of the weight, all of just struggles that you're going through. And then let's do one more. Breathe in, fill those lungs up, fill it up with joy, resistance, freedom, inner peace. And then breathe out. Just breathe out all the pain, all of it. Just sit right here. Know that you are enough. Know that this world is crazy, but we can still grieve the craziness and experience full-on joy. There you go. Let me just explain to you a little bit of my story and a little bit of what I believe in, but I really want to touch on my upbringing, because I think a lot of people don't know or really understand. But growing up, I grew up very Christian. I grew up in a very Christian home, which some would say a little bit more charismatic or more Pentecostal, apostolic. I kind of grew up around that. My mom joined the church that I grew up in when I was about 2 years old. It was a little bit after we moved back from Georgia, after my grandmother passed away. And before that, my mom actually grew up Catholic, and she, I think, dibble and dabble into one other religion, but she grew up Catholic. But I ended up growing up non-denominational Christian with her when she joined that church. I was basically, just because I was a child, I was just going along with her. But I always knew of God. I had an idea of God, but I wouldn't say that I was like full-on Christian. I think that with my autistic experience, I think it was hard for me to really focus in church and really understand what was said, what they were preaching. And even like being in children's church, it was just very overwhelming. But I just survived. I read the Bible We've always prayed before I went to bed, and we would pray in the car. And there were times where I really didn't want to, but my mom's the type of person that would get on me if I don't do something like right, or if I'm not myself, she'll notice it, and then she'll just try to click me back in it. You can't get upset. You're gonna do this regardless. If I don't feel like praying, she'll make me pray anyway. That's the type of stuff that she was on. And with that, I noticed that with being in church, of course, I'm gonna go back to the autism part. It was very overwhelming because they, of course, very charismatic and very heavy into like emotionalism. There was a lot of tongue speaking, a lot of praying out loud, and a lot of spontaneous worship. And there's some point where I did enjoy it, and there were some parts where it was a little bit overwhelming at times. And they would also lay hands on people. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with how laying hands work. Usually is when someone just starts praying for them and they'll like fall out or they'll cry and things like that. That was something that I've seen a lot, and I have meltdowns because of it, because I didn't know what was going on. So I would like run up to them, and sometimes I would like try to stop them, because in my mind, in my little mind, I thought that they were hurting them, but it really, even though they really weren't, I didn't know that. And oftentimes my mom had to pull me from them. They would often pray for me in a certain way. I don't know if they knew that I was scared, or I was just being obnoxious and acting out, trying to get attention, which I really wasn't. I really didn't know what was going on, but I dealt with that. But at the age of 12, I stopped going consistently. And remind you, I was going from the age of 2 to about 12, and eventually I started going back in my teenage years. I was going to church every Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday, and sometimes even on weekends if they have events or things like that. I was going to church like 3-4 days out of the week, and a little bit more if it was like revival. And those church services were long and draining and overwhelming. There was one point where my mom and I, we didn't even get home until about 1 a.m. That's just the environment of it. And even with laying hands and I guess tearing and things like that, those were also overwhelming too. But I also gotten like the prophecies before, most of them centered on my autism, one on music, and then there was like one where there was one person told me that I was going to be a doctor. Nah, I don't see that. But fast forward to 2020, and that was around the time, to me, I felt like I officially deconstructed. But what really led me to my deconstruction journey is that I came out as queer, or at the time, I originally came out as bi at 19 years old, after realizing that I didn't just like men. And kind of realizing that and having that self-realization and kind of coming to terms with my newfound individuality and identity, my faith in God was very conflicted. And I knew that early on that the questions that I had, that I wanted to ask my mom and that I wanted to kind of ask in childhood church, it wouldn't be accepted. And eventually it led me to doing my own exploration. I found a couple of communities. I found a queer affirming community online on social media, but then I messed up and I got connected to another religion, the Jehovah's Witnesses, which I thought about joining. I didn't join, but I did study with a lovely woman. She was nice, but I realized it didn't work out. And while I was in the middle of studying with them, I started to do some deep diving on Jehovah's Witnesses and what they believe. And I saw more negative than positive. And then once I started really digging deep into it, I've seen that their baptism was very complex, but then at the same time, I noticed even in the meetings that I attended that they weren't necessarily about individuality to me, but more so about recruitment. But then it confirmed what I've been hearing from people that were Jehovah's Witnesses and left, that it was very rigid, but it was very limited. And after I had one Bible study with her about birthdays, because they don't celebrate holidays and they don't celebrate birthdays, and she was reading the scripture as to why they don't celebrate it, which I do kind of appreciate the fact that they're very into studying and things like that, and it was very calm. But then once I was having a study with her and we talked a little bit about that particular scripture, which I read it, and I find it ridiculous as to why they don't celebrate birthdays due to that one particular scripture. I ended up just like stop communication with her, and that I don't regret. And which also led me to another space, which in 2021 I ended up getting baptized for the first time. Even though I was already openly queer, that baptism didn't really change my queerness, but I was a little bit more closeted, and I did start to post a little bit more about my sexuality, but I noticed that I did get a couple of pushbacks from people from my childhood church, and because of it I ended up stopped posting again. But around 2022 I randomly got a couple of friend requests from a lovely girls that just so happened to be Mormon missionaries, and there was one girl who sent me a video message on Facebook about my belief in Jesus and things like that. I decided to look up LDS. Was a little bit fascinated on it. They seemed a little bit more organized, but I wasn't really like that familiar with it. But then there was another girl who reached out to me, and then I ended up doing a study. To make a long story short, I did a little deep dive, and I thought, if I join this, would I be truly accepted, and will I be able to express my beliefs? And then I saw that they were queer affirming. There was an organization that had queer Mormons, but that maybe I would be safe with them. So I decided to do it, delusionally thinking that I would be truly accepted for my beliefs and it would be a safe space. I ended up getting baptized, and I was like quickly hired or was able to serve as the Relief Society assistant secretary, which was pretty decent. But then I noticed that the lack of inclusion and the lack of representation, and there was something that I heard, which I'll say it was the day before the 4th of July, because remind you, they did nothing for Juneteenth, but I noticed they tried to get more black members. But I've noticed that they did a lot like the 4th of July, and it was a little bit more patriotic. And on that Sunday, I went in there, I was a little late, and everyone was singing the Star Spangled Banner. I shouldn't be weirded out, but here we are. And then as soon as I sat down, and the first Sunday they do like a testimony like Sunday, where all of the members, they come up there and they kind of just share how the church is true and how God loves them. And there was one particular person that went up that day and said that, and I quote, "It's sad to see many people disrespect the flag." When I tell you, I was very uncomfortable, and I walked out. Because in my, at the time, 20 years of life, or 24 years of life, 23, 24 years of life, 24. I've never heard it. And I just couldn't believe my eyes. So I just sat outside, and I just had to deal with the discomfort. And then there was another incident that happened where 2 white male missionaries thought I was wearing purple tights. Intentions, but I noticed that I'm done. I stopped going to the services, and let's get to the next part. Then around 2023, just to wrap it up, in 2023, I ended up going kind of back to my childhood church as just like a safe space. Well, not safe space, but like a place to just relax. Because I was at the point in my journey where I just really was not traumatized, but was like, I had a lot of questions, but I knew that the questions that I have and what I believed in would not be accepted in the childhood church. And I knew I would not be accepted in the Mormon church, truly. And it was like too rigid for me. I was like caught in the middle. But it wasn't until I found this lovely group called Holy Smokes, or the Faith Community, on social media. And the more of their content that I watched, the more comfortable I got. Remind you, I was still kind of like in my childhood church trying to mask and just fit in for survival. But it was just something about that group that was, I finally found my people. And I was also still church shopping and trying to find the space where I can truly not just live out my faith, but also be able to have those questions answered. Because I was also already part of another queer affirming group, and then I joined some other groups that I thought were accepting, but it was more like fell for the aesthetics and things like that. But I'm still deconstructing, and now I'm in the middle of decolonizing, but it's my story. But I want to go to the next part, and I want to talk a little bit about what really radicalized me and why my faith is a lot more radical compared to just the people that I grew up in. For as long as I can remember, I have always been very passionate about liberation, even if I didn't know the language. Just learning about kindness, but also speaking out about issues and a lot of injustices in the world. And I really thank social media for that. But also growing up as a child that was born in the late 90s, I'm a Gen Z, older Gen Z. I grew up with shows like Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street, and even reading Black history books and learning about MLK and all those things. But it wasn't until I started surrounding myself with a lot of activists and self-advocates. I've done things with Access Living, which is a center, one of the biggest centers in Chicago for people with disabilities, that is the hub for disability advocacy and disability pride. Chicago was actually one of the first cities to actually host a disability pride parade. There's a lot of history with disability justice and disability pride and things like that. And being able to go to Springfield to advocate for disability rights at 17 years old really radicalized me, as well as even standing in the pouring rain, advocating for change regarding gun violence and bringing awareness to gun violence in the pouring rain. It was just me and a few people, because there was someone that at the community center I was going to, Impact Family Center, was killed and impacted by gun violence. Bringing attention to that, I didn't realize how much I would love it until I started to just learn more about social justice issues. And then the Black Lives Matter movement, I think, really shaped me, because I'm Black, I'm also autistic, but I also grew up in a single parent household in low income neighborhood, which you don't really see a lot in the autism community, and I feel like that has got to change. And I'm not mad at seeing Black individuals with two parent households and middle class income, and that's actually great. But there are still also individuals like me and so many others that did not grow up with a lot of wealth and privilege and being able to go in nicer schools and have all the accommodations and all the help and true emotional support. That also should be talked about more often. But basically, that's what radicalized me. And I'm glad about it, because if it wasn't for that, I think it really helped shape me to be the person that I am today. But let's talk about quirky faith. And now you heard a lot about my story and a lot about my experience. Let's talk about quirky faith and what it is and why I identify with it. Quirky faith stems from my Christian upbringing, as well as the influences from other religions and other spiritual practices, as well as my autistic experience. Because growing up in the Black church, unfortunately, autism and disability has kind of been frowned upon unless it's in the idea of wanting to heal that person from it. To me, when I think of quirky faith, I think of living out a faith that doesn't have rules, that doesn't have ways or particular ways to worship and honor God. For me, I've always prayed God in a certain way. I've never really fit into the one ways to worship. It's like if one person is lifting their hands and things like that, I would typically maybe unmask and worship my own way. Or if there's someone that is standing still, I may stand. It's to me living out a faith that doesn't limit anyone. Like someone says that, oh, you have to read the Bible, you only have to read the Bible, because if you read just the Bible, or like if you read the Bible and another sacred text, then you are mixing the word, which isn't true. I think that if you're someone that is Christian, I think reading the Bible and also reading other sacred texts is great. But also there's this thing called binary thinking. And binary thinking means that you think one way and the only way. And when I learned about binary thinking and how it did affect me and how I was raised, I realized that kind of thinking really held me back. And that's something I'm still learning about. Just to summarize, quirky faith is living out a faith that's free from binary thinking, free from limitations, and free from rigid rules. You can stem, you can scream, you can dance, you can meditate, and all those things. And you don't have to normalize yourself just to be loved by God or divine or whoever you believe. And even if you don't believe, you just have to be a good human, do good into the world, spread radical inclusion, which that's also how I frame my activism and how I view liberation, because it's intersectional. That's what quirky faith is. And the quirky faith really influenced how I spread change into the world. With me being in a lot of those spaces, I realized that there are some ways that I advocate that may not fit into the typical norm. With me, I do a lot of advocacy in social justice, slowly starting in social justice, but I also do a lot of activism in disability justice spaces. And I am also a Best Buddies Global Ambassador. And with me being a global ambassador, I have a big responsibilities to advocating for true inclusion, radical inclusion. Because inclusion isn't just about including people with disabilities or disabled people in spaces. It's not just about inviting them to join Best Buddies so that they can have a friend. It's about making sure and accommodating those individuals. You're including their individual voices. You are paying them for their work and their labor. You are just not just inviting them to hang out with them, but you are truly learning about them. You're learning about their individuality. You're learning about their personality. You're learning that they're also a human. And I feel like when it comes to my activism, one of the biggest influences that I feel like is a really big influence in my life. And he's someone that's been dead for years, and I still think about that man till this day, which is Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, which I found out was also a Presbyterian minister. Of course, he had the TV show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and he invited people from different walks of life to join him, and he has conversations with them, and he just listened to their experience. And I think the beautiful thing about it is that he didn't have to force his beliefs on them. He didn't have to say that, like, oh, if you want to hang out with me, you must be this, you must be Christian, or you must believe this way. No, he really took the time to learn about the individual person. He took the time to learn that individual experience, and he advocated for issues that really mattered in the world. And his beliefs and his legacy still lives on, and I'm grateful to learn from him, but also from Sesame Street and also Disney movies. Even though there are some things with Disney I don't agree with, but a lot of their movies really stood out to me because I think the message is really about just love and kindness and doing good in the world and stepping into your individuality. I think it's very, very healing. And I think also listening to artists and listening and learning from activists like Angela Davis and Judy Heumann, those individuals really shape how I view the world and how I tackle my faith and activism, which is why radical inclusion is so near and dear to my heart. Now you may be wondering, you talked about quirky faith. You shared a little bit of your deconstruction journey. You shared a little bit of your upbringing and the radicalization. Now, what do you currently believe in? Well, I'm glad you asked. Right now, I identify as a spiritual humanist. And what that means is, although I am very spiritual in my beliefs, and a lot of it is rooted from my Christian faith, I have also embraced humanism. And humanism is just, and I'm sorry, humanism is basically treating the person like a human being and not just thinking about converting that person, but more so seeing them as an individual and not just like someone that needs to be saved, because we are all in this world just trying to do the best that we can. But I know that a lot of the spiritual beliefs that I have, I'm still uprooted into it. I have embraced a lot of spiritual traditions and practices. Now, Christianity, I don't really limit myself from Christianity, although I don't identify as one. There are still a lot of Christian beliefs that I still keep uprooted, like the teachings of Jesus. I may not worship Jesus as like a God, but I honor Jesus as a human being and a liberator and an ancestor, because his teachings really shaped my worldview, and he really was that OG liberator and activist. And I see it a lot more in progressive Christianity. Those are the things and those are the beliefs that really still stick with me. Like him flipping tables, you can't tell me that's not radical, because it is. But not only that, I have embrace a lot of traditions. I definitely embrace Unitarian Universalism, Buddhism, Hinduism, African spirituality. Those are things that really shape my beliefs. And because of being in a space like Holy Smokes, I have learned a lot, but I'm still connected to Christianity because I currently attend Christian churches. So I go to the very famous, very well known, which I don't call it like famous, but a lot of people, if you're in like very liberating spaces, may know about Trinity United Church of Christ, who is currently pastored by Reverend Oldest Moss III. He's wonderful. met him a few times. Great human being, very down to earth, very humble. But I've been part of that church for a couple months now, and it has helped a lot in my spiritual journey. And I love that the sermons and messages are very justice rooted. It's not really like just on personal growth, but it's also about how you change the world and how we should be good people and live out our faith, not just through ourselves, but how we share to others and do the activism. And even if you're not an activist, you can still advocate for change and live the teachings of Jesus through justice. But I also love that he also educates people 5 minutes after the benediction, which it's went viral lately. He does this thing where he asks everyone if you could just give him 5 minutes to bring awareness to the current social issues that's in the world. Some about due process, the origins of Project 2025, and even with the threats about the National African American History Museum in DC, which if you haven't become a member today, become a member. If you are financially able to, $25 a year, those things. And then I also go to New Covenant Missionary Baptist Church, also known as the Cub, which is currently pastored by Pastor Stephen Thurston II. I was a little bit hesitant because I don't really have a lot of history with Baptists, but Pastor Thurston, I did not realize that he was that radical and they were that radical. I will say both churches are very affirming. New Covenant is also the home to the Office of Pride in the Pews, which is also great since I know that it's a safe space. He also preaches about a lot of justice, but also a lot of spiritual things as well. And he's also a very kind, loving human being, and he practices what he preaches, and he's very down to earth, very introverted, not really the type of brag, but he'll put someone in his place, and rightfully. I'm glad that those spaces are still helping me out, but I'm also connected to other spaces like Galileo Church in Fort Worth, Texas, Gathering Womanist Church, and probably a few, but those are the ones that really helped me a lot. So before I end this video, I want to give you guys some encouragement and some tips that can really help you. And I really hope that you got a lot out of this video, because I know I talk a lot. I know that I say a lot of things and I ramble a lot, and I know that it was a little bit all over the place, but here are some things that I really hope that you get out of this video. Starting off with, it's okay to have questions about faith and spirituality. As you get older and as you start to learn more about yourself and the world around you, there are just questions that you're probably going to ask, and it's okay to tackle them, but it's also okay if you don't know the answers or someone around you may not know the answers. Just please affirm that you're not crazy and you're not being led astray. So please remember that. And then another thing is find community. Find those people that are willing to be able to embrace you and embrace the questions that you have. I am very grateful that I have Holy Smokes, and if you want to join Holy Smokes and be part of the beloved community, the link will be down below. There's a free tier and there's paid tiers, but the great thing about it is that they are very transparent on their finances and where the money goes. You'll get not only community, you'll not only be able to join an ecosystem of loving human beings, you will not just be able to, find groups, affinity groups, or groups in the ecosystem that you may align with, but you'll also find and be able to listen to podcast episodes where they deconstruct in real time a lot of the theology that a lot of us, even some that we may not know, grew up on. These are real people, these are real human beings, and they're very personable. You're gonna get a lot out of it, and there's also a lot of perks too. So join the community today. But then also, never stop educating yourself, never stop reading, never stop learning, and just find all the resources you can. And there are plenty of books out there, and I will link a list below of books that you can read that will help you with your deconstruction journey or decolonizing journey, if you would like. Because and I'll say this, what this administration, or a lot of people that are well off and privileged in our society, what they don't like is people that are educated, people that know what they're talking about, people that are able to say that, oh, I know my rights, oh, I know my beliefs, and oh, I know this, that, and the third. They don't like that. They don't like the fact that we're still able to have joy and find ways to learn and explore and grow. As you navigate this journey, keep on making those people mad, because knowledge is power, and knowledge can also be accessible. Like, you don't just have to read a physical book, and if you're not comfortable, there are videos, there are also articles, and you can also listen to podcast episodes. And also, I really hope that one day that activism and social justice spaces and even church spaces can become inclusive to not only individuals that may not look like me, but also individuals that may not act like me. My hope is that even churches in my community embrace quirky faith, or just individuals that may not look like me, act like me, because oftentimes Black people with disabilities like myself, we're often left out of conversations, and we're often not being taken seriously. But the more we educate ourselves and the more we try to educate others, I think the more open churches can be. Really, my hope is that we can get to a place where we don't have to be scared or have to hide parts of me just to fit in. I'm grateful that even just sharing this story, it could probably help someone. You never know. But that is it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope it brought some enlightenment, or it just made you learn something new about me that you may not know about. But I'll see you all at the next video. Stay tuned for the next Quirky Faith video. This will be a series of 4 videos, and this is just the introduction. I'll see y'all around. Jada Waiter out. Make sure you spread some radical joy today. See y'all later.